The wind that morning had a cruel edge to it. The kind that sliced through thin jackets and numbed fingertips no matter how tightly they were tucked into pockets. The city was awake but not alive, gray skies hung heavy, and every face that passed seemed wrapped in its own storm. At the corner of Rosemont Avenue, a young man named Aiden stood waiting for the bus, clutching a worn backpack, his breath turning to mist in the cold air. His shoes were damp, his jacket too thin for the early winter chill, but he'd learned to live with discomfort. What he hadn't learned yet was that small, unplanned moments, like this one, had the power to change everything. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of unexpected miracles, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Fearless Grace. Because stories like this remind us that good hearts still exist, even in the coldest days. Aiden's morning had begun like any other. He woke up in his small rented room, a place with peeling wallpaper and a heater that barely worked. He worked as a night shift cleaner at a grocery store downtown and took morning classes at the community college, hoping to finish his business diploma someday. He didn't have much, but he had determination, and that was something poverty couldn't take from him. As he stood waiting for the bus, rubbing his hands for warmth, his tired eyes caught sight of a woman sitting alone on the bench. She looked out of place. Her long brown hair was damp from the drizzle, her business skirt wasn't suited for the biting cold, and her high heels were stained with mud. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to hold her phone, which seemed to have died. There was something quietly broken in her posture, like someone used to control but momentarily defeated by circumstance. Aiden hesitated for a second. She looked like someone from a different world, well-dressed, refined, the kind of person who might have an office on the top floor of a glass building. But right now, she looked cold. That was all that mattered. Without thinking much, Aiden took off his only decent jacket, the one his late father had given him, and walked toward her. "Hey," he said softly, "you look freezing. Here, take this." She looked up, startled. Her eyes were a deep shade of gray, lined with exhaustion. "Oh no, I couldn't. You'll be cold." Aiden smiled faintly. "I'll survive." "You look like you won't." For a long moment, she studied him, the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine warmth that wasn't just from his jacket. Then she took it, slipping it over her shivering shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't even know your name." "Aiden," he said, stepping back. "You'll catch the next bus." "I'll wait for the one after." She opened her mouth to protest, but he was already turning away, pretending to check the schedule. The bus arrived, and she hesitated before stepping on. As it pulled away, she looked out the window, watching him stand alone in the cold, his shirt clinging to him in the wind. Something about him lingered in her heart long after the bus disappeared down the road. Her name was Ilara Monroe, CEO of Monroe Innovations, a tech startup that had grown rapidly over the last 5 years. That morning had been the worst in months. Her car broke down, her phone battery died, and she'd just come from a hospital visit where her younger brother had been diagnosed with a severe illness. She'd been too overwhelmed to call for help. Yet, amid that emotional storm, a stranger had given her warmth, literally and figuratively. Days passed. Ilara couldn't forget Aiden's kindness. His jacket still hung in her office, freshly cleaned but heavy with meaning. She'd built her company believing in hard work and merit, but this simple act from someone who had nothing reminded her of a value she'd lost along the way, human compassion. Meanwhile, Aiden continued with his routine, unaware of how that single gesture had rippled far beyond that bus stop. His boss had cut his hours, money was tighter than ever, and he was behind on rent. But he told himself that as long as he kept moving, things would eventually get better. Every night after work, he studied until he fell asleep on his small couch, dreaming of building a better life, not just for himself, but to prove that humble beginnings didn't have to define endings. One rainy morning a week later, as he arrived late for his shift, his manager called him over. "Aiden, someone's here asking for you." He frowned, confused. Standing near the counter was the woman from the bus stop, this time dressed in an elegant navy coat, her hair neatly tied back. She smiled as she saw him approach. "I was hoping I'd find you," Ilara said. He blinked in surprise. You got your jacket back." She nodded, holding it out. "Cleaned and ready. But that's not why I came." He tried to hide his embarrassment, suddenly aware of the stains on his uniform. "You didn't have to." I did, she interrupted gently. You gave something when you had little to give. Most people wouldn't. You don't know what that meant to me. He smiled awkwardly, unsure what to say. I just didn't want you to freeze. She chuckled softly. Sometimes the simplest reasons are the most powerful. Then her tone shifted. Aiden, I want to offer you something. Not charity, but an opportunity. My company's launching a community program that helps train and hire people who faced hard times. I'd like you to be part of it, paid internship, mentorship, everything. He stared at her, disbelief flooding his face. Why me? Because, she said, you're the kind of person who helps others without expecting anything in return. That's exactly the kind of heart I want in my company. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in Aiden's chest. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but all he could manage was a quiet, thank you. The weeks that followed were nothing short of transformative. Aiden joined Monroe Innovations and quickly impressed everyone with his work ethic, creative ideas, and quiet leadership. He soaked up every bit of knowledge, often staying late just to learn more. Ilara kept an eye on him, not out of pity, but admiration. She saw in him what she had once been, a dreamer who refused to quit. As the days turned into months, their paths intertwined beyond professional lines. She mentored him, encouraged him, and found in his humility a grounding she hadn't realized she needed. He reminded her that success wasn't measured only by profits or prestige, but by how many lives one could lift along the way. One afternoon, during a company meeting, Ilara announced the launch of a new initiative called the Kindness Project, a fund aimed at supporting underprivileged students and workers seeking to rebuild their lives. To everyone's surprise, she invited Aiden on stage. This program, she said to the audience, her voice steady yet emotional, was inspired by a stranger who offered me his jacket one cold morning when I had lost faith in people. He didn't know who I was, and he didn't care. He saw someone in need and chose kindness. Today, that stranger stands beside me, not as a cleaner, but as one of the brightest members of our team. The room erupted in applause. Aiden's eyes glistened as he looked at her, realizing that his small gesture had sparked something far greater than he'd ever imagined. From that day forward, Aiden became a symbol within the company, a reminder that true success begins with compassion. His story spread across social media, touching thousands of hearts. People began sharing their own experiences of helping strangers, inspired by a man who had once simply shared a jacket. A year later, Aiden completed his diploma and was promoted to a junior executive position at Monroe Innovations. His life had come full circle, from cleaning floors to walking the polished halls of one of the city's fastest-growing firms. Yet, he never changed. He still took the bus sometimes, still smiled at strangers, still carried that quiet belief that kindness mattered. One spring morning, standing at the same bus stop where it all began, Aiden noticed another young man shivering in the cold. Without hesitation, he took off his jacket, this time, a sleek company coat, and handed it over with a familiar smile. Here, man. You look like you need this more than I do. As the man took it, grateful and surprised, Aiden looked up at the sky. The air was still cool, but inside, warmth spread through him. He finally understood something Ilara had once told him during a late-night talk in her office: kindness doesn't end with one act, it continues in ripples you may never see. And in that quiet moment, those ripples were already moving forward, unseen yet unstoppable. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Fearless Grace. Every click helps us bring more real, emotional stories that remind the world of the power of compassion. And before we end, tell us in the comments, when was the last time a stranger's kindness changed your day? We'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes, it's not grand gestures that change lives, it's the warmth of a jacket on a cold morning, given by someone who still believes the world can be kind. The end.